I think that was a brief enough introduction for Helga, but just to add on to that, I think it's also important to say where she comes from, because it's Flatdal, because I think a great part of your story, or the stories that you've written, also reflects a lot of the landscape itself, which is a very close-knit community in Norway. Norway, that is where she comes from. One of the major pivotal works that she's done is also something called a modern family, which is where I see a transition to a character driven narrative from your earlier works. Coming to Toxic, this book which is under discussion here, I think it's a very honest portrayal of flawed characters and messy relationships, uh, where it invites audience to sort of sit in that discomfort, make sense of what is happening, and also make peace with whatever is happening around, which in fact is my first question to you. Like throughout your book, I feel that there is a need of self awareness, accountability, and courage to confront painful truth which you are discussing. You are nowhere giving any very solid moral answers, but rather somewhere you are forcing audience to reflect on what is happening in their own lives. How would you comment on this?
Thank you, and thank you for a wonderful introduction. I'm very pleased to be here. And I think you're right. And I think in all my novels, I want to write about characters that are believable and that reflects the nature of human being. And that is that we all are flawed and we are not perfect and we are complex and we are not either good or bad. We're somewhere in the middle, depending on the context, of course. And in Toxic, which looks like this in the Norwegian version, and its title in Norwegian is actually Reverberation. And my UK publishing house called it Toxic, and then it looked like, let me see, this. So it's pretty different. And that's sort of exciting about the translation and the foreign rights. That's every country has its own interpretation of the novel. And now I forgot your question. Sorry, I'm talking.
So I was asking you as to why was it a very forced decision to force audience to reflect on their personal journey rather than you giving any sort of moral answers or
Yeah, of course. I have in all my novels. I think there's a sort of a political context, and I use family as a starting point to discuss broader themes. And I never want to sort of lift a moral finger and tell the audience what to think or to and how to react. But I think recognition and the fact that we are all human beings are sort of the common ground for me and for the readers to reflect. We both embark on this journey that is the novel together, and we sort of explore the human nature together. And that's sort of my only goal with the novel is to sort of depict complex characters as you and me, and sort of exploring how they and put they in them in different contexts and see how they react together with the reader.
since you had mentioned the translation, how it moved from reverberation to toxic, which one do you think is more apt for the book?
Uh, I I think for me it's of course the Norwegian one because that's the reason that it looks like this is because the pattern on this one is uh, it stems from the Norwegian traditional clothing called bunad, and this has my grandmother is it's her broderie, so she has sewn my bunad with this pattern, and it's very traditional Norwegian. So it's also sort of resonates with the content of the book and the themes. But still, as we talked about before this session, the because Norway is a very small country, we are 4 or 5 million people. and it's a very small language. I am so grateful, and I'm depending on the foreign rights and the translation. So I would never talk badly about anything. They can do whatever they want, and I will still be pleased that they want to bring my novels out in the world. So I'm very grateful for that, and I think it's exciting how this can turn into toxic and the sort of more of a crime fiction display. Yeah.
I think we'll get into the discussion about toxic, which is one of my follow up questions, because I think that also works exactly fine for the novel. Now, my question is, I think in this work especially, there is a lot of unveiling of truths that you are doing, because you're showing a need for love, but at the same time you are also showing how we fear loss, or how there is a whole tension between tradition and change. So these are all extreme content, for that matter, which you are sort of discussing in the book. So what really pushes you to talk about the unsaid, or what is not usually spoken about? Because like you said, yes, the characters are flawed, like any of us for that matter, but not always do people really talk about this. Whereas I think that is one major thing that is being discussed in the book. So
Yeah, I don't think any of us want to display our flaws in full display everywhere. I certainly don't. But that's sort of I think I'm probably just as interested in psychology as I am in literature, and I am deeply fascinated by the small movements between human beings and in the human mind, and how we react to each other and to our relation to our family members or friends or neighbors for that matter. And that is what I'm trying to depict, the smallest movement between us that we don't even think about, that we don't reflect, we just do. And that's how the small and large communities are working, because we are this sort of, yeah, I think that's.
so I think your interest in psychology is very evident throughout. But I think probably one of my next questions is also how you sort of intertwine the mindscape and the landscape. Because at one point, especially when you talk about Matilda's character, there is it's well explored as to how her psychology works, why she's functioning in a particular way. Though you are not giving exact answers, at the same time, there is an exploration of her psyche, and you also have a very contrasting very lyrical depiction of Norway itself. So how do you bridge these? Like at one point, you show how flawed Matilda is, all that conflict is shown, and the other end you are also bridging it with a beautiful landscape of Norway. So how are you looking at mindscape and landscape together?
Well, I do think that landscapes forms us as human beings. And I am myself from Telemark county, which are sort of unusual for the eastern Norway because it has high mountains, and the rest of Telemark is very flat. So I do think that the high mountains are forming me as a person. Like I grew up in a small community with 700 inhabitants, and the small communities are, of course, a lot different. The rural Norway is very different from the urban Norway, and that is how I think for Matilda as well, as she grows up in Oslo and she loves Oslo, is the big city, and then she comes to Telemark and faces the small community and the landscapes that are sort of challenging her to think differently, but she doesn't understand how to think differently, so she has to adapt sort of, and then she meets two locals that sort of both teaches her but also judges her in the same way. So she's struggling with the ambivalence there.
All right. My next question is more to do with consent and power dynamics, because when you talk about a global picture as well, this is something which we, especially in the current era, discuss about what is consent and how does power play in consent. And that itself is the point where Matilda moves from Oslo and to the farmland. How do you look at it? I mean, I am clearly not asking you to point fingers or be very moralistic, but at the same time, how are you exploring consent in the story itself?
Well, I have been curious about, and I've written in several novels about the power dynamics. And in Matilda's case, she is sort of a bit of an unusual female protagonist, right? Because she's very little self awareness, she's uncompromising, and she has sort of a relational compass that are a bit broken, you might say. So, and that's because of her background and her upbringing, and that leads me back to the psychology that I am very interested in. That what shapes us from childhood and how we become adult humans with the longing and needs that we're trying to fill. And Matilda is trying to fill her gaps and longings uncompromised. She is desperately seeking. And that leads her to paths where she does do mistakes. Like, because she's getting engaged, involved romantically with one of her students. And the age, it's legal because he's over 18 but it's not acceptable, of course, and that's why she gets fired. But I think it's interesting because her student is the one that are the aggressor in that relationship. He is the one that sort of hits on her, and and she does do mistakes, but it's not black and white. And I think that's the main theme in all my novels, that thing that may by the first glance seem black and white is actually, of course, as in every story in every part of the world, it's not black and white.
Now, coming to Andres and Joe's characters, I think similar to this whole gray area, what is being discussed there is more to do with uh, how we somewhere hold on to our legacy, but at the same time also wants to break from that and move. I mean, to find our own path. So, how do you look at that?
Yeah, of course. I think, and that Jus and Andres is the brothers that Matilda meets in this novel, and they are sort of the symbol of the traditional Norway. At the same time, they are the owners of a very modern agriculture, and they have this modern view on the agriculture aspect, and then they have a very traditional view on their values, and especially family values, that they are very obsessed with the idea that everything has to be as it always has been, especially because of their grandfather and his grandfather and the generations ahead of them. So they are sort of struggling with the traditional that meeting the modern needs, and they're sort of caught in the middle, both of them. And then Matilda comes and sort of challenge them even more.
The reason as to why I found the title toxic apt for this is it talks about the different kinds of toxicity we are all carrying, for that matter, and how uh, again the whole question of morality, because somewhere Matilda questions the brothers, but she herself is flawed. So that loop keeps happening, I feel. My question is, how have you used the farm as a metaphor of this? How do you call it? Sort of an inherited toxicity. Is that how you have looked at the farm?
No, actually not. But it's a good interpretation. But I haven't thought about the farm that way. For me, I'm from a very large farm myself. My father is a farmer, and we do have a modern dairy farm in Norway. So my angle was more of a realistic one. I wanted to show the modern agriculture in Norway, because it's often this is depicted like very small and very old-fashioned in the Norwegian contemporary literature, and I wanted to show a different side of the Norwegian rural living, and that was actually the starting point for the idea behind Toxic. Was during the pandemic, a lot of Norwegians in Oslo and in the cities were moving to the districts, to the rural, because they wanted to sort of be more of a slow living with the more traditional way, and be out in the nature and go on hikes on the mountains, and sort of had this very idyllic views on how the Norwegian countrysides are, and they moved out of the country, and that's what Matilda also do. But for me, who has grown up in the countryside and on the district, I wanted to show that there's not only the idyllic, romantic side of the rural part of Norway. There's also sort of, it's the same complexity there as in the cities, of course, and the people there are just as flawed and just as fascinating as they are in the cities. So that was sort of the starting point for the whole novel.
Which again I think was a very different way of showing, because we are used to showing urban as very dark and the rural side as some a very, what do you say, serene space for that matter, which was broken, I feel, in the novel. Now talking about the pandemic, did it later be part of the novel, or like in your writing process itself was it included?
Yeah, I wrote the novel during the pandemic, at least the last part of it, and everybody said to me when the pandemic hit Norway that authors will are so lucky in these times because they can just continue their work, and that must, and no disturbances, and you can just sit and write. And I couldn't write a word. I was so sort of taken back by the whole close down and the shutdown of the cities and all the. So I was actually less productive during the pandemic than I've ever been before. But I sort of I wrote the last part of. No, sorry, that was my last novel. This I started on during the pandemic. Yeah, yeah.
Because pandemic happens to, I feel it's similar to all the there are five major characters for that matter. Pandemic also plays a major role in the novel, because that was somewhere a time when all of us were challenged. We did not have a precedent, we did not really know what to do, and it was a time when there was isolation and introspection, which
Sure.
are both major themes of the novel. So how do you look at these two when it comes to the novel, and how far do you think pandemic has helped as a setting for that novel itself?
It definitely was a big part of the framework for the novel, the pandemic, and I think also it's interesting how the, because of the isolation, and you had to be very much together with your family or your close one, and that was all you could interact with. It sort of took a strain on a lot of relationships. I think we got a sort of upscale by divorces right after, but also a lot of new babies. So I think that was it hit both ways. But of course, when you are hit by something that's unfamiliar, you have to, and because of the isolation, you have to take a good look in the mirror, and you get the time to do that, and you see things in yourself and in others that are both, of course, positive, but also maybe less good than, yeah.
Because in especially in Matilda's case, what I feel, it's a double isolation that she goes through. One, she moves from the city to the rural landscape, and on top of which there's also the pandemic which is hitting. So
Yeah, but Matilda is one of my favorite characters in my whole writing process, because she is so little self-awareness. I have to have her self-awareness within me, but she herself does not reflect on anything. She escapes, And that's what she has been doing her whole life. She's been escaping, tried to escape from herself and her own emotions and her own relationships and her own mistakes. And then she thinks that she can escape to the countryside, to Telemark County, and she will sort of have this amazing awakening, and she will be an amazing writer, author, and everything in her life will be perfect again. And of course, that's not what happened. Quite the opposite, actually.
The now in the novel there is this whole discussion about tradition versus modernity. At one level, it has got to do a lot with the farming practices or the climate change itself that's happening. But are you also looking at the whole discussion or the conflicting ideas about how we need to make peace with our past to move forward? Is that also is that how you're looking at the dialogue between tradition and modernity?
Uh, um, Not necessarily make peace, but we do have to accept what has happened, and we have to be able to look at it and learn from it. That's what I have been thinking.
All right. Now, when it comes to the folk tales that you have used, is there a particular reason as to why you have used these folk tales?
Yeah, of course. Uh, the folk tales is a large part of my upbringing, actually, because they are connected to folk Norwegian traditional folk music, and they are told as in relation to Norwegian folk music, and especially the Norwegian Hardanger fiddle, which is a very special fiddle. And Etterklang is actually structured as a Hardanger fiddle because the fiddle has four. The special thing about the fiddle is that it has four overstrings and four tiny understrings that you don't play directly at. They just vibrate and resonate with the overstrings. And in the novel, I have over chapters and under chapters. And in the under chapters, that sort of are the understrings in the fiddle, you find the folk tales. And the tales are strikingly often portraying women that are somewhat disobedient, or bad in some way, and they get ultimately punished for it. And I was trying to make those tales resonate with the over chapters, or the main story about Matilda as this rebellious woman that goes to Telemark and do make mistakes and are judged and punished in the same way as these women that goes thousands years apart.
Somewhere I feel that it does show a double standard when women face outside these societal norms.
Very double standard. I agree.
Uh, do you look at Matilda's journey as a modern feminist narrative? Modern feminist narrative? Do you look at her journey as a modern feminist narrative?
uh, yeah, it's. I don't know if it's modern feminist, but because I didn't have the feminist or the thought in my head when I wrote her, but I do wanted to write a female protagonist that didn't have the caregiving, or the mother, or the wife, or the sort of traditional way of portraying women in the novel. I wanted her to be more with the traits of the manly trait, the masculine traits that are, yeah, she doesn't regret. She is, as I said, uncompromising, and a bit not very empathetic. And I wanted to show that in a woman's portrait, she will be judged and she will be set in her place. And in Norway, I have got so many angry phone calls and emails about Matilda's character. They are very angry with her. Especially women are very angry with her. And that's fascinates me, because I was aware that I wrote a female character that was maybe a bit provocative, but I didn't realize the full aspect of it and of how provocative she would seem to my readers. But she has sparked a lot of debate in Norway, which is very fascinating to me. And I myself, I love Matilda's character, and I love that she is just as little self-awareness as a male character, that she doesn't regret. And I do think that, because I have reflected a lot, that what makes the readers so angry with her, what is it about her that are so provocative. And I think that ultimately it's because she doesn't learn from her mistakes. She repeats them, and we do want people both in literature and in life to learn from their mistakes. I really want, but as human being, we don't always do that because of the psychology behind the longing and the gaps we need to fill. And Matilda is repeating her mistakes, and she gets very badly judged for that and punished for that.
You were talking about women not liking Matilda for that matter. Do you think it is because Matilda was a woman, and do you think if a man in your film did the same set of things, she would have been forgiven? He would have been forgiven?
Oh, most definitely. I don't think she would have even sparked a debate at that in any way, actually. I think she would be a bit boring man. And that's very interesting to me, that Matilda is so provocative to the readers, but as a man, she would be boring and sort of vanilla sort of type.
All right. I would like you to talk about the two characters which I feel are what drive the entire story, or what, but are not really in the not really in the novel. Which one is Matilda's mother, and one is Andres and George's father. The inheritance where it comes from. They're not entirely there in the novel, but I feel they are the reason as to why the novel itself happened, or the reason as to why the children turned out to be a particular way. Like I was telling, the inherited toxicity. How do you look at these two characters?
Yeah, I think you're right. They are the sort of starting point for both, because they are, of course, they are relatives and parents to Matilda and Just, to the main characters, and their behavior and that brings me back to the psychology of the childhood experiences, because Matilda's mother died when she was 4, and Matilda has always tried to sort of live up to her reputation, because when someone's dead, you only have the reputation to live up to. She can't measure herself. She can't mirror herself. The only thing she can mirror herself to is the memory and the things that she is told about her mother, which are great things. So that's sort of the difficulties that she has to deal with growing up, and she both resents and admire and misses and loves her mother. So it's a complex relationships. And Jot's grandfather, Johannes, is sort of ruling the family from his grave because of the traditions, and because they are too afraid and sort of too bound by him still after his death to do anything different than what he would have wanted. So they are, and they are both artists, and I think that was interesting to me, because I've been, as an artist myself, I've been interested in what will be forgiven in the name of art, that you can be as selfish and often sort of both mean almost, and in Johannes's case, he's sort of a tyrant in his monogamist, and he is a very little likable person, and still he is forgiven because he's such a wonderful fiddle player. And Matilda's mother is also very selfish, and not suited to be a mother, obviously, but is also forgiven because she was such a wonderful author. And I think that's interesting how we forgive in the name of the art people that are just displaying horrible behavior. I'm not talking about myself, obviously.
At the same time, are we also defining what or how people should be? Because, like you said, she's not a good mother, but she's a good author. So, how do we define a good mother in that case?
No, just because she is too, she's more occupied with herself and the writing and to get the time. So I can relate to the need to get the time or the place in my space in my head to write, and everything else has to sort of be down prioritized to that. And Matilda's mother is, of course, prioritizing the author's work, her writing, and her love life over her daughter. So I would say that, if maybe not bad mothering, but not perfect, certainly.
With the fiddle competition again, that happens, do you think there's a familial expectation that is running throughout, be it Matilda or the brothers? Are they still running in that expectation which comes from the family? The familial expectation. Do you think Matilda and the brothers are going through that? Do you think that is a reason as to why they are what they are?
The expectations of the family. Yeah, they do have, as we all do, we have to live up to the expectations of other, and in these cases it's of course the parents or the grandparents that are sort of the what they have to measure up to. And it's impossible in both cases to measure up to both Matilda's mother, because she's just a reputation. She's dead, and nobody can. And also with Johannes, which are also dead, it's impossible to measure up to them. And that way, Matilda and Jos, as the main characters, never get their needs fulfilled, because they do have to compete with sort of the past, and they don't know what the past was really like. And that's sort of what we do with the memories. They are false, and we can't compete with them. So that's an impossible expectations to fill.
All right. In the beginning, you did mention about the work being extremely political, but at the same time, it does not show the political milieu of Norway. Uh, it I think dives more into the intricacies of the domesticity. Uh, do you think you should have included the actual politics of Norway in the story, or does that somewhere influence how they are?
Well, I think family are a highly politic theme, because, as I said before, I do use the family and how we conduct ourselves in families as sort of a mirror to how we conduct ourselves in the larger society. And I think the family of origin, our family of origin, is sort of a blueprint on how we later both start and conduct our own families, but also how we engage in other relations in life. And politics are relations, of course. So I think the idea that the family is not politics is sort of it's wrong. It's highly political, and it serves very good as a mirror to how we conduct ourselves in the largest societies.
This is more to do with your writing style. Was the non-narrative style a conscious decision? Sorry, the non-linear style a conscious decision? Non.
Yeah, if you ask my editor, he's here. The non-linear style is sort of a trademark for me. I go back and forth and back and forth, but in my head, it's very linear. I have the whole timeline very apparent for me when I write. And then I do have to go back to explain how this is happening now, and she conduct herself this way in this situation because this has happened in the past. and that's how I think I've written all my novels, and I don't even think about it. That's just my style, I think.
A similar style, which I've also noted, is the minimal use of dialogues in the novel.
Minimal use of dialogues. Oh, I thought I had many dialogues. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I do, but I do actually like to write dialogues. So if you think there's few dialogues, I will write more dialogues because I like to write dialogues. So thank
Probably,
you.
yeah, someone who's write more of Indian works, I think us is more dialogue oriented.
That's very interesting, actually.
Uh, I think before we open to the audience, one question which I would like to add is, uh, you are also known for writing children's book, and when you talk about the novels you've written, otherwise these are extreme complex adult. I mean, what do you say? Very difficult situations which you narrate in the films. How do you work around those extremes?
Well, my children novels are actually for very small children. They are for learning to read. I it's not even the same. It feels very different to write for such small children. But I'm actually working on a children's novel right now, or a youth novel actually, between the age 8 to 12, and I think that's the most important novels are for children and youth. And especially in Norway, I don't know how it's in India, but in Norway, fewer and fewer people are reading books because of Netflix and the competition is so high. So to write good and serious, and to take the children literature and the youth literature seriously, and go in with the same effort and the same complexity is highly important. And I really want to try to do that with the next novel. But the two children's books that I've written so far is just how to learn to read for small children. Yeah.
Which one do you think is more difficult, writing for children or writing for adults?
I think it's more difficult, at least for me, to write for children. To write good for children is a complex art, and I want to master it, but I don't think I do. But I will try.
I shall now open the discussion to the audience if you have any questions.
You'd mentioned how you have chapters that you call like the over chapters and under chapters, as in a fiddle, and about how they resonate or reverberate. So I want to ask about how you think about how you plot your story and what counts to you as an over chapter and an under chapter, and how your planning works around that.
Yeah, I do plan quite a bit of my novels ahead. I like to plan the framework. Like, I know my characters, and I know the theme, and I know some points that I want to get to in the novel. But in between those frames, I want to be as free as possible to get sort of the imaginational flow, and not to be too self-critic, because that's a sort of a occupational hazard, and try to just write as freely as possible within those frames. So I do have sort of the characters and some of the points I want to reach, and then I just try to be as free as possible within that framework.
Hi, I'm Veena. Thanks for the wonderful discussion. I'm definitely going to pick your book. I have an observation and a question. So my observation is, in your work and when you speak, you talk about two dimensionally opposite things, like modern working values, traditional family values. You talk about city, you talk about country, you talk about obedience, disobedience. You think linearly, write non-linearly. And your name says you love mountains or high, but your name says Flatland, Helga Flatland. So that's an observation. So my question is, with respect to the character Matilda, was it difficult to keep her, not learning from her mistakes? Because as humans, as psychologists, your interest in psychology, you would want to put her in a corrective frame. So was it difficult, or did it flow easily?
Thank you. Good observation. And just to comment on the name, Flatland is actually because I do come from a very flat land, between two mountains. So that's where the name stems from. So it actually is very flat on a farm that's called Flatland, on a flat land. So that's the explanation to that. I think writing Matilda was difficult, not because I can recognize myself in a lot of things in her, but it was difficult not to reflect too much on her behalf. So I think we had to go a few rounds to delete some of my me wanting to her to be more self-aware, to reflect more on her mistakes, and to sort of because I, as a writer, in similarity with the readers, do want a happy ending, right? And the happy ending would be that Matilda was learning from her mistakes and was walking around the world as a better person with good relationships to everyone around her and happily ever after, right? But so it's difficult because I sort of care for her, so I want what's best for her, and then I do want to give her that, but then I would ruin the novel. So I had to keep her that way, and it was so yeah. It's a balance. But to answer your question shortly, yes, it's difficult. Yeah.
From the concept of family, folklore, and traditions, definitely there will be an underlying element of being possessive, because it's a traditional concept of folklore, family, and even you are saying about farmlands. Everything is depicting a tradition or a conservative element, and from there, how you conceive that metamorphosis to that terminology of being toxic, or when it happened in the English title. How do you conceive it, ma'am? That being toxic from it is something like grey, isn't it? That word itself is from this tradition and conservative elements.
Yeah.
That word itself is somewhat changing into something a grey word, being toxic.
Being toxic.
So yeah. So how do you relate to that things, or how do you conceive that, ma'am?
I think the title "Toxic" is referring to, because that was obviously not my title. It was the UK publishing house's title, and I like it because it's sort of reflecting the toxic. Of course, the pandemic is sort of the toxic theme here, and the toxic masculinity that is portrayed in the novel, and it's toxic in the traditions as we talked about. So I think it is a good title after all. I didn't understand your question because it was a bit hard to hear. Sorry.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible to you? Okay. Ma'am, I have yet to read your book, but you wonderfully described all the plots and character to us, and I'm looking forward to read that. And as you have mentioned that the it's very difficult to like the way you have described the character, your main character Matilda. It shows that she faces a lot of difficulties uh, with her past, her quite narcissistic grandfather. So all these things, it all, and you have yourself faced some provocative calls or from messages from others. So as an advice or a suggestion for future writers or new beginner writers, how would you say that how to face all those things? As again, coming from your own life story, that you said that in Norway less and lesser people are, the youngsters specifically, are getting into reading. So in this current time period, and also as a suggestion towards the future writers and beginner writers, just a suggestion, what would you say? And also after getting all these provocative messages, how to keep on continuing? Thank you, ma'am.
If you're asking about advice for future writers, it would be to just write what's close to your heart and what you want to write about, and not think too much about the audience, because because we are somewhat I do believe that we are somewhat alike, every one of us. So that what matters for me, I think, will obviously matters to others as well, and it sort of has. So I don't know if I have any better advice than to just write what's close to you and where you feel that it's the most engaging thing to you.
In between, I'm not sure if there are more questions. I want to ask you, since your editor is also here, what is the kind of editing process that you go through, or from your first draft, how different is Toxic right now?
From the start of Toxic, how different is it now, Jon? I'm looking at you. I think it's the editing process is extremely important because we do have to. If we use Matilda character as an example, we have to shape her into being as precise as possible for what I intended with her. And there is my editor reading and commenting and saying like, but here she is too soft maybe, and it doesn't resonate with me that she is as kind to her mother here, or it doesn't ring true that she would say that in this situation. So the editing process is very important and difficult, but it's sort of tuning in to the small parts of the novel, and that's also the some part that is the most interesting because it turns into it sharpens the novel a lot. So Toxic looks very different from the start to finish, but not as different as some of my other novels actually.
Are there more questions? Okay. Do you make a conscious effort to make any of the characters or the theme universal? Or do you like the advice you gave, just keep writing?
Try to make them.
To make it universal, because again, like you said, one of your major audience group are also ones who are reading the translated works. So if the work has to resonate with them, the themes or the characters has to be universal. Do you do it or consciously, or
No, I don't. I, I write what I'm interested in, and often my novels doesn't even start with the idea for a novel. It starts with my own. My novels doesn't start with the idea for a novel. It starts with my own interest for or curiosity about a topic, and then I think about it a lot. I discuss it with my family and friends, and then it sort of just turns into something that I want to explore in a literary way.
I think as we move towards the tail end, I would like to know, is there something that you're working on? Audible? Now, as we move to I think the tail end of the session, I would like to know what are your future works or the works that you're currently working on.
Yes, I am actually bringing my script for my new novel with me, along with my editor here to India, because we are in the editing phase of my next novel, which will launch in Norway in July, and that means that it will probably launch in the English version maybe a half year or a year later, and I don't know the English title at all. So that will be exciting because I don't even decide that for myself.
What are the major challenges you face as a writer?
The major challenges I face as a writer is myself, and that's because I do have to rely mostly, of course, on my own imagination and my fantasy and my creativity, but also it takes a lot of self-discipline, and I'm not a very disciplined person. So to get past my own blocks and self-criticism and shame is a large part of it, to display to the world what I have been sitting in my office writing and sort of saying this shall matter to somebody else is very scary to me. But then again, I feel extremely privileged that it actually do sometimes. And I think it's I do think I am extremely privileged because writing is the one thing in the world that I think is the most rewarding thing to do. And I would have done it even if I wasn't a published author. I would have written anyway. So I'm extremely lucky to be able to make a living of it and to, of course, to come to India because of it. So I feel extremely privileged. So yeah.
Now, through your works, is there a bigger motive or something that you're looking at? What do you think people should earn from your work? Or do you think about that process when you write?
I do just with my novels. It's impossible to see. I want you to get this from it. I just want people to be engaged by it in whatever way. It doesn't matter if they are angry or they get sad or they get provoked or they get sort of politically engaged or if they just are entertained. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to say something and I want somebody to receive it, and then the dialogue between us is the most important thing. And if I can move just one bit, because I know the readers are moving a lot of bits in me, and so that's the wonderful thing about being an published author is the dialogue with the audience and with the readers and how we move things in each other.
And coming back to Toxic, is there a specific takeaway that you want? Like
No.
at the end of the book, what do you think people should
Well,
do?
at the end of the book, in Toxic, many readers have been wondering about the end. So I think that's what most people are taking with them, is what happens with Matilda at the end. And that's sort of the mystery and the crime element with the novel that I will not reveal here.
So the moral ambiguity was a decision that you made. You wanted it.
Definitely. But to be serious, she does sort of disappear into the mythic tales and become a part of the tales. That was my thought about it, to sort of mix the reality with the tales in the end. Yeah.
All right. I am assuming there are no questions and we have a minute left. So for the ones who have not gotten the book yet, there is an English translation which is available. As someone who's read the book, I found it a very honest portrayal of human beings as such, honest portrayal of relationships, because I think most books, like I was mentioning to you earlier, we are barely honest about these things, and that is where you stand different, because you left it ambiguous, because most of us are ambiguous at the end of the day. So I think that's where the book is very different, and I'm sure I would open audience to read the book. Thank you.
Thank you.